Hey everyone, Miss GoElectric here. I'm in New York City at the Newlab facility, which is a tech incubator, and I'm sitting down with Zach Schieffelin, who is the founder and CEO of Civilized Cycles. Civilized Cycles is a very unique e-bike brand, and I've had a chance to ride around on their bike for a few days in sunny Florida, and it is unlike any other e-bike that I have ridden or reviewed. So I'm excited to talk about the backstory and get into it more with Zach. Let's get into it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Zach.
My pleasure.
I want to get right into this and figure out exactly how you started this company. But first, can you give us a background of what Civilized Cycles is all about and why you created this brand?
Sure. Civilized Cycles is fundamentally about applying technology to enable more and more people to use this incredibly efficient, fast, practical, economical form of transportation. To date, most people have kind of taken the approach of taking a bicycle and putting a motor on it. And we said that's great, it's a great start, it lets more people ride. But once you're doing that, there's so many more opportunities to improve the user experience and make it a technology and a platform that's accessible to a much wider range of buyers.
So how did you get into the whole e-bike realm? Because this starts from a very, very long time ago, right?
Yeah. So I've been a lifelong motorsports and two-wheeled and four-wheeled enthusiast. You know, I was one of those kids that if you could catch it on fire, crash it, you know, spill gas on yourself, I loved it. But as my sort of consciousness started to rise in college that climate change was a thing, I kind of realized that the future needed to look very different from the way it does today. I grew up in traveling all over the world with my parents, and one of the things that I observed was that most of the world, with the exception of the United States, most people get around on two wheels, whether it's a bicycle, a light motorcycle, something like that, but it's usually slow, it's usually can carry a couple of people, and that is kind of the 80-20 rule. For 80% of the trips you need to make, that covers what you need to do, and there are other solutions for that other 20%. So I just always was naturally drawn to two wheels as an efficient, attractive solution for the world.
So what was your background in schooling? Because you went to college, correct?
Yeah. I started out actually as an art major, sculpture major, which was great because it gave me a bunch of skills in fabricating and some visual skills. But to be perfectly honest, I was watching my friends graduate from school with art degrees and be unemployed, and I had this long-standing passion for cars, so I actually went to tech school and got a degree as a automotive service mechanic, and did that for a couple of years while I was enjoying my young man life as a rock and roll band and motorcycle racer and things like that. But then as I kind of saw where the future was going and what I felt I needed to do to have impact in the world, I went back to school actually here in New York to NYU, to the Stern School of Business, where the hope was to acquire a set of skills that I could use to really make an impact in the world and kind of start steering the ship in a different direction a little bit.
Interesting. What ended up keeping you here in New York?
Yeah, well, I actually was in the dot-com, I was timed perfectly for the dot-com bubble, so I was working at a high-flying dot-com job when 9/11 happened, and both me and my wife, lost our jobs pretty shortly after that, but we had the good fortune of having recently bought a Vespa, and the wonderful thing about a Vespa is it's two people, go anywhere, cross town, diagonally, doesn't matter, you can always park it, and you have this incredible, romantic experience of kind of being together. And we thought that would be a real winner for the city. We had a frankly lousy shopping experience and thought we could do it better. And we did the classic entrepreneurs thing of, raising some money while, telling Vespa we'd already done it and vice versa. And we started Vespa Soho really, about 9 months after 9/11, kind of as a way to say, screw you to the terrorists, we're going to rebuild and build something amazing in Manhattan. That was a super fun business. We were very successful, but it was clear that there was no real path for electrification or for progression in that world. The companies that were doing it were all very conservative. In roughly 2008, when the recession hit, we added a bunch of lines to try and expand what we were offering into stuff that was more green. So we added e-bikes, the best e-bikes we could find at the time, cargo bikes, the earliest electric motorcycles, there really weren't any good electric scooters at the time. That kind of didn't exist. And we put this on our showroom floor next to the Vespas, and we just watched people play Goldilocks all day long. They said, oh, I love the 2 people and the comfortable suspension and the go anywhere across town and I'm not sweating and I can wear nice clothes of the Vespa. But I don't want any of that license, registration, gas, oil, weight, motorcycle license. Oh, that's a whole thing. There was just this very clear, repeated demand for people, telling me on my showroom floor that they wanted this piece from the cargo bike, this piece from the scooter world, this piece from the Dutch bike world. And they're like, can you build that? And the answer was, yes, I can build that. I can see where this is all going, and that technology is, nascent in the products that we're selling today. Let's see what we can do to take that further. So I, did your classic, wasn't really a napkin sketch. It was a proper, large size art pad, but I started making some really crude sketches and defining the key product attributes that I thought would matter. And I hired a young man out of Rhode Island School of Design who was very, very gifted to help me make it beautiful. And we started showing it to our customers in the store, and it was so compelling to them that they literally stopped buying our other stuff. So they're like, oh, I'll wait for that. When's that going to be ready? And I was like, this is on paper. Can you buy the thing I have in the store today? It was a sketch. So, as that kind of became clearer and clearer, we actually stopped showing it in the store because we had enough data and we needed to sell what we had. When it was clear that our relationship with Vespa was going to wrap up, real estate in downtown Manhattan didn't make any economic sense for it anymore. And, we had been quietly whispering to them, hey, we need a product like this. And there was, just falling on deaf ears. We said, no, this is an opportunity. We can do this. And so we kind of laid out a roadmap of what we thought the critical elements of this platform would look like over the next, 15 years. And the model we used actually was the motorcycle, because the very first motorcycles were bicycles that people put motors on. And then they started going faster, and what did people demand? Well, they demanded being more comfortable, and they demanded being a little safer, and they demanded being able to take their girl or their buddy or their partner with them. All of those things resulted in technologies to address that. With the traditional bicycle, we've stripped all that stuff out because we've needed the lightest possible thing for a person to pedal around. And in bicycles, because the bicycle itself is what's called the unsprung mass, the more you make a bicycle weigh, if it doesn't have a suspension, the worse the ride quality is going to be and the more dangerous it's going to be at higher speeds. It's just the laws of physics. So we said, okay, bikes are going to be heavier with batteries. They're going to be going faster with batteries. The data proves that in terms of if you look at how people actually use e-bikes, they go twice as long, twice as far. Speeds are about 5 miles an hour higher. And that to us said, well, absolutely critical is the suspension, because that suspension, for most people, they're used to driving in a car. Right? Like a car, you don't worry about what you're running over. You just drive and pay attention to the world around you. And we wanted to bring that experience to the bicycle, because for many people that, first nasty pothole you hit that swerves you out into traffic or something like that, that's like a danger moment. You're like, yeah, I'm not into this. So we knew that had to be an issue. We knew that passengers would never accept being on a vehicle without suspension, because passengers don't get any warning that there's drama coming up. They don't get to stand on it. They just take the hit. And, most passengers are not going to take more than one hit. They'll be like, yeah, thanks, I'm done with that. So we knew that had to be solved. And that was a technical problem that no one had solved in bicycles before, because unlike a motorcycle or car, bicycles are super light. So when you vary the weight on a bicycle, it changes things a lot more than when you do vary the weight in a car. Like you put 200 pounds of people in a car, you've changed the weight by 3%, 4%. On a motorcycle, you've changed the weight by 40, 50%.
Dramatic, yeah.
On a bicycle, you've changed it by 150%. And if that person is 100 pounds different from the other person, you might have changed it 300%. So we had to solve this problem in the suspension where a wide range of riders could use it without an elaborate setup process. So we automated the system that racers have used in cross-country mountain bikes, which is a manual process of adjusting the suspension just right to them. We automated that, and then we filed patents. And from there, we just kept kind of developing this idea of what else would be important. We knew storage was important. I find for me, one of the most miserable experiences on a bicycle is carrying a heavy pack. All of that weight goes into your butt, into your legs. You get a nice sweat spot on your back. But every one of us who goes anywhere and does anything, we all have stuff in our lives. You got a laptop case, you've got your presentation, your gym bag, whatever it is. So I said, the ability to easily manage your stuff was another critical piece. In cars, we have trunks. We're used to that. It's a really useful feature. If we could bring that to the bike world, I thought that would be cool. And I said, with these form factors that we can now do with electric, which frees us from the tyranny of a giant hot motor in this place, we can now do some really cool things with packaging, and that's what allowed us to do the panniers. So.
Well, what's interesting about that is that you could have just, bought a frame like a lot of other e-bike manufacturers from overseas and all these other components to put this bike together, but you decided to go the hard route.
Yep.
Slight tear, I saw, no.
Yep.
But really bring something very unique and special to market. And so not only are you doing something different with the suspension, but also this whole drive setup is different too. So can you talk a little bit about the decisions you made with all of the system working together?
So the thing to understand is that all of the design decisions in this bike are geared around a non-cyclist consumer. If you're a cyclist, the world is your oyster. You literally have hundreds of brands of products to choose from, incredible selection. In fact, most consumers have the problem in a bike shop, they walk in and they're overwhelmed by choice. There's so many different specifications, price points, styles. And if you think about a more mature market that is a transportation-oriented market, that's the car market. And when people shop for cars, no one goes into the dealership and asks, oh, who makes the brakes in this thing, or who makes the air conditioning condenser? They look at the object as a whole and what it does for them. And so we kind of looked at the kind of, what we sometimes call the Chinese menu approach of like a motor from column A and a frame from column B and a wheel from column C. And we said, we're never going to be better at other people at doing that. So we need to create something that is for folks who are not being served by that world. And so when we thought about how we're going to design it, we thought about what do people who drive, what are they expecting? So that kind of shifts our priorities around. We don't need to advertise that we have the brakes made by this person and the motor made by that person, because what we're selling is our bike. So what we care about is what's the form factor like? How does that work in your life? And we could not find any solutions but the one we came up with that allowed us to have a very small step through, a very small chainring in the front, which allows for clear step through. You don't get your pants stuck in it. It's very compact. It also allows for a very slim frame design, so we don't have to have a big pumpkin like the Bosch mid motor. That's a great motor. The challenge of it is that it forces a very limited number of frame designs to accommodate its positioning and shape, and some of them aren't that pretty. And we wanted something pretty because, frankly, when you go buy a car, it matters if it's pretty.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
we found ourselves very limited in that. So we found this kind of unique way of doing things in the driveline, and it's a little more complicated and a little more different, but we think that the benefits of the drivetrain outweigh all of that. And it's funny because I've had traditional bike mechanic has looked at it and been like, oh, it's so complicated. I'm like, have you looked inside an automatic transmission? People love those, right? Yeah. They really help in your life. So we basically said that they're decisions in the bike world that were made because they had to be bicycles, and we really view the e-bike again as sort of like this almost other animal with these other opportunities. So our design was really driven by that. We wanted to have a mid-drive with a high torque so that you could climb with a heavy load and a passenger, and you could pull away from a stop with authority, because nothing worse than wobbling away from a stop. You want to pull away and just be confident and smooth in that. For that you need a lot of torque, and for that you need a mid-drive. This was our solution for doing that.
And what's interesting is that you, like you mentioned before, is developed this frame. So can you talk about like the prototyping phase of coming up with this very unique design and incorporating it so that everything is the elegant solution behind even the pannier bags that you have here? And we'll get into those in a little bit.
Yeah, we went through 6 generations of prototypes where we started with a tubular metal frame that just kind of copied the basic geometry to check that. But the real heavy lift was working with our manufacturing partners to be able to create this frame, which is all aluminum. It's feather light. It's a very complex shape, and it has a tremendous number of consumer benefits because it has a big step through. It provides mounting points for all these sorts of other features that you can't buy off the shelf frame. It just was challenging to make because no one's done it.
Yeah, it seems like it. That's why I wanted to ask about it. It's very unique. And to that point, let's move on to those panniers, because that's also an extremely unique element that I haven't seen on a bike like this before.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of our larger engineering challenges. And, again, going back to the kind of car model, our goal was to increase integration, right? Where, if you look at a car, it's not pieces anymore. When they started, they were like, there's a wheel clearly attached to like a motor. Now everything is kind of one piece. So we wanted to continue that. And we thought it brought some really big advantages for the bicycle world. Cleanliness is a huge one. Keeping kids' toes and fingers and, shoelaces and stuff out of moving parts is another big one. Another one is just a psychological thing. Like if you're carrying your friend, and this is typical like with dudes don't like to hug dudes when they're behind. Having a rigid form there gives a place you can hug with your knees like a horse. So you don't have to do that. And that, again, makes more people who can carry passengers comfortably. So we just sort of saw this opportunity to kill a whole bunch of birds with one stone. And most panniers, like on a bikes today, are like, you throw your bag into it and maybe you remove the whole thing and take it with you for security, or, it holds maybe a backpack size thing. But I always found that it was never big enough. I wanted to do groceries. I wanted to carry, my boxing gloves, my pads, and my gi all at once. Like there was just never enough stuff like in a backpack or whatever else. So we wanted to make them big. But big panniers, when you're not using them, are in the way. So we wanted to make them go away. And so I just kind of had a vision of how this could work. And the prototyping actually went reasonably smoothly. We went through a whole bunch of generations to figure out the best way to close them and so forth. The biggest challenge has just been, because they are an integrated hard and soft good, is just getting manufacturing dialed in. But we're there now and really excited to kind of show something new and to deliver a bunch of value in a space that's kind of been neglected, I think, in the bike world.
Can you talk about like the manufacturing process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the single greatest challenge of hardware startups is the chicken and egg problem, right? Everyone wants to see sales before they give you any money to build something. And of course you can't have sales if you don't build anything, right? Yeah. So this is the biggest challenge. But we were very fortunate in being able to form a relationship with a manufacturer early who really saw what we were trying to do as different and as special, and who were kind of willing to grab the brass ring, as it were, and stretch, because we know that this is a little bit more than a bicycle, and they had to learn some new skills, and there was a learning curve on both sides for us. But if it was easy, someone else would have done it already.
So you guys had some impact, I'm sure, with the pandemic, as everyone did, and you were kind of building up the company at that point when it all hit. So can you talk about the impact of that, especially because, like I said, you have these volume components that you want to reach to the masses to get this bike out, but they're very specialized. So
there are many people in the pandemic who suffered a lot worse than us. But the timing for Civilized cycles could not have been worse. We were supposed to go into production in late March of 2020. And so it literally was the worst possible time for everything to shut down. We couldn't travel to Taiwan. Components became difficult to source. And most maddeningly, when the machines started to spin up again, some of the key components, particularly our very robust and strong front fork, which we're not going to mess around with substituting, just became super long lead time. I think if we had been a bike with a motor company, we would be out of business already. I think that the fact that we're here today and have made it through that period of time when, the big challenge in the pandemic was that e-bike sales went kind of vertical for everybody, which was awesome. A rising tide lifts all boats, unless you're not in production.
Yeah.
And in that case, you're suddenly like, can someone please build me? Well, everyone's like, we're getting rich building these guys. So that was, really, really difficult to navigate. But because we're doing something different enough, and that we've got a bunch of things that no one's doing, and we've got a lot of intellectual property in this, fortunately, our investors and our factory basically said, we're going to wait and work with you and, put in the extra funds, because we know that over time, this is going to be something special. So I've been very fortunate that I've had, that confidence behind it, even while it's been a very long process. Fortunately, all those pain points have now kind of eased, and we have the capacity to build in volume over the next 18 months. We have a real good window, and shouldn't be an issue anymore.
So let's talk about a little bit more on this facility that we're in, because you had created a home here essentially, and this is a very unique space because it's kind of like an incubation center where a lot of different tech companies are working together. But what have you found is helpful by being in a place like this at the stage that you're at with the company?
Well, I took the difficult road of being a solo founder for many years, and I now have awesome partners, and the company is growing. But for me, having a community of other people who were sort of in the trenches doing technology and hardware work was incredibly valuable. There's the emotional support, but probably more important from a development and business point of view, there's the ideas, the breaking of a log jam by that right conversation at a magical time. And the last piece is just the exposure to and the participation in a thriving community of cool technology that's happening. There's several other mobility companies here. We share some problems, but none of us are stepping on each other's toes, so we can really collaborate on stuff. I would recommend anyone who's trying to start a business to try to find a community, because that community will support you and be very helpful.
Absolutely. And this hasn't always been your home, has it?
Well, I mean, the company, of course, like many others, was for a long time paper and a desk and
Yeah.
and a dream. But we did a couple years stint in Portland, Oregon, and then moved back here in anticipation of production. Love Portland, great bike city. It was while we were grinding through prototypes, it was an economical and lovely city to live in. Had some great bike experiences there. But New York is where my family is, and New York has this, Portland doesn't have the scale that this does. And, I can be in this facility and have conversations with people who are, major managers at super senior levels of, big automotives or technology companies. I mean, the conversations that happen here are all super valuable.
So, as of right now, you have built one bike, and I'm sure there are going to be, iterations and things that you improve on over the course of its cycle. But what does the future look like for Civilized Cycles?
From a brand and product strategy point of view, maybe not so much brand, but definitely from a product strategy point of view, we're kind of trying to follow the Tesla model, where they came out with an initial car that was kind of their wow, it's really different. That sports car was just a dramatic piece that got people excited. We wanted to build this bike to kind of secure the key technologies that we thought were important for the future and to show people what we were capable of. As we build volume, in time we will, of course, add to the market lower price point versions that have some of these same features, but are built in a more economically effective way. I mean, in all manufacturing, there's always this balance between volume and price. This one has to be priced where it is because of all the special technology and manufacturing expertise that goes into it. But when we're building 10,000, we can start to really kind of shift the needle in some other ways. So we have a very long both product and technology roadmap. There's a lot of opportunities in the app world, that are, I believe, fully untapped right now in the electric bicycle community. Tremendous opportunities on the commercial side of the business, maybe not necessarily for this bike, but we have some core technologies that in a commercial cargo bike application can be extremely compelling, cost savers and safety improvers. The light electric vehicle space is a space where there's suddenly room for new entrants to really make a splash, because like all other businesses, the existing market folks are very focused on defending what they have. And that always leaves space for the folks with fresh thinking and who can move quickly to move things quickly. But timing is key. And I think the timing is really right now. Super quick anecdote. My director of production is a gentleman by the name of Mike Fritz. Mike Fritz was Lee Iacocca's chief technology officer for his e-bike company. Nobody knows that Lee Iacocca had an e-bike company.
Yeah.
He started an e-bike company and they launched in the United States. In their first year they sold, and this was I think 1996 or 7, like they were super early. And they sold 8,000 their first year. And Lee Iacocca thought that was a total failure and shut it down. because he didn't see what the opportunity was.
He was so used to scale too.
He was like, oh, if I didn't do 50,000, it must be a joke. But
wow.
you know, when you're introducing a new concept and a new product, and there's some newness to it, that's always a little bit of a heavier lift, but the reward is better, right? That's when you can create something new. He also created the minivan.
What's interesting to me is that you find people like this. So he's been in, you know, this realm for a long time, more than like a longer period of time than you would expect. So how do you find the talent that can help you build a company like this that is so specialized? Because
my background is a little more automotive and motorcycle than bicycle, you know, I have had the, I don't know if it's a luxury or not, but I've had the opportunity to pull from a wider range of industries. You know, I don't just hire bicycle people because, you know, my experience is that people who are passionate cyclists are a type. Yeah. And you know, they're willing to suffer on a bike. They're very performance oriented. They're very detail oriented. And these are all great human attributes. But when it comes to designing a product for people who are not like that, there's some blind spots. You go into bike shops 10 years ago and ask for an e-bike, and there's a bunch of like athletic young guys in there or young women, you know, with very thick thighs. And the moment you tell them you want something that you're just going to get around and do stuff on, like they're like, oh man, I'm sorry.
You're taking away the,
you don't want to go fast. You don't want to jump off a mountain. It's like, you know, that stuff is great, but not every day, right? Like, you know, there's another, you know, I have a sports car for when I want to go on the racetrack, and I have an SUV when I'm with my family. Like there are different tools for different jobs. And so to me, I just saw that as like, there's a design opportunity that was being missed where, you know, my parents were both anthropologists, and you know, as a kid, I always thought that was super weird. But the one thing I took away from it is I learned how to observe people, and you know, many of the lessons that are in this bike come from simply watching how people actually use bikes and the way they try to solve problems and the things that are pain points from them. And that careful observation combined with doing it in a business with all sorts of two wheels, that's sort of the heart of how I see things. And you know, if you want to talk about what a product arc is going to look like, our goal is to build bikes for people who drive. We want to bring the experience that people are already used to the two-wheel world with all the safety, comfort, and convenience that is there. And that's how we get people out of cars. Now, when I was driving in today, I noticed that you have dedicated bike lanes that are separated from the street. That is just so impactful in my eyes to getting more people riding e-bikes and creating a more safe riding experience. So can you talk a little bit about the safety and the regulations that go along with that, because the government seems to be whispering about things that they might start implementing when it comes to the e-bike industry? Lots of studies have shown that the number one factor for safe riding is actually the number of other bicycles on the road with you. And the willingness of people to ride is also very, very closely tied to their exposure to cars, because most people correctly view the greatest threat on a bicycle is cars. New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but also a host of many of the smaller American cities have all discovered that they have the same problem, which is that you can't put more cars through the same lane. Yeah. And the only way you can actually move more people and more goods through a city is actually take out car lanes and give them to bikes, which puts 10 times as many people through for the same space. So that creation of the separated bike lane, I think, is going to have huge positive impact in our country, for our riders, for safety. And I encourage people to advocate for that everywhere. Use your maps, use your politicians. But bike lanes that are separated are nicer to ride in, and just give you that space to feel safe on the road. And speaking more about safety, not only safety for the riding experience, but also with batteries now, it seems like the government might be talking about some regulations as far as not only riding, but batteries. So can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that? So I look at safety in sort of two halves. There's what I call active safety. That is, what's the safety that comes from what you're doing, right? So in our view, the full suspension is a big safety up, because now you don't have to pay attention to the road surface. You can pay attention to the world. Now you can hit an object or an obstacle or a pothole and not be disturbed. And because of all that, you can actually cruise at a slightly higher speed, which makes it more useful and practical and so forth. The great things about bicycles, and particularly bikes as they're regulated in the United States, is that the total speeds involved are all relatively modest, so that as long as you're not getting involved with cars, it's a pretty safe way to get around and do stuff. The issue of passive safety in terms of things like fires and stuff like that, that is largely an issue, I think, of newness in the industry where we haven't yet attracted the regulation that all other industries have. And, I have a slightly contrarian view on this. I actually like regulation because regulation gives manufacturers a clear bar to meet and a clear standard to meet. And even if it costs money, being safe costs money. It's as simple as that. It's worth it, right? It's cheaper than a hospital bill. We are welcoming that regulation. We've designed ours already to be compliant with all of that. And in the last couple of years, those regulations have been kind of a moving target. So as regulations are actually passed and the laws are promulgated, we're looking forward to just complying with them. And that takes away the stress from the manufacturer side of saying, did we do enough?
Sure.
Right?
And the government is also trying to create some incentives in some places. So what is your perspective on incentives for e-bikes? Because we just saw a big bill pass that was incentivizing vehicles. In some states, they incentivize e-bikes, but what's your take on that?
So as a manufacturer, obviously, it's very good for me directly if someone wants to directly subsidize my product. And so if we look at cars and they're getting X dollars, and we look at e-bikes and we should say they should at least get X dollars too. Having said that, I personally believe, because of all the things we just talked about from a safety point of view, that the best investment of public money is not in direct payments to consumers to buy bikes, but into building out that infrastructure. If you build a bike lane that either uses parked cars as a separator or puts a physical barrier or bollards or lifts it up on a curb or any of those things, those do take a small investment. They are going to produce far greater returns in terms of adoption, safety, usage, all of the public benefits that we want from cycling, I think, than direct payments to consumers. The challenge is that direct payments to consumers works really, really well for getting that quick juice of bikes on the road. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see, as policymakers get more data, which is going to be the more effective approach. But I'm all about the long-term investment of infrastructure because that's what really makes it available to the people who might just pull that old dusty bicycle out of their garage and finally they feel okay to ride. Every person who's taking a trip not in a giant gas-powered vehicle that weighs 3 tons, doing it on a bike, that's an improvement. If you look at the trips that we take in this country, fully 1/3 of every trip we make in this country is less than 15 miles. In most cases, there's no reason to do that in a big gas-powered vehicle. It's just wasteful, it's expensive, you have to fight for parking on the other end. If I have to drive here from my home in Astoria, it's going to be 15 to 30 minutes longer, and I can't park.
Yeah, parking is a huge concern.
Yeah, and it's unpredictable. So if I'm gonna plan a trip, I'm like, well, it might be an hour and a half, so I have to leave an hour and a half. It might be 45 minutes and I'm cooling my jets. On the bike, it's 35 minutes, like clockwork. I can set a watch to it, it's predictable. I can budget 35 minutes. And to me, that time is an incredibly valuable thing to get back in my life.
So this brings me to my next point, because you said, if you were to drive, but you ride this bike here all the time, right?
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on your experience of riding it on a daily basis? And also, because you ride it with your wife, your partner, so give us a little insight on that.
I built this to solve many of the challenges that New York City uniquely has for riding, but everyone else has too. So we have some of the worst potholes in the world, but we're not the only ones with potholes, right?
We can rival you in Michigan.
Yeah. You'll throw down on the pothole challenge, right? I believe you. So, we knew that was just, parking is a particularly diabolic challenge here, but I have been in many, many other cities where, you get to the mall and you're circling the block and it's, all the time you saved driving, you wasted parking. And then you have a long walk anyway because you had to park at the far end of the lot and so forth. So for me, I love the immediacy of riding in New York. I have control of my destiny. I always have parking. I can predict when I'm going to get there. Those are really valuable things that it's hard to go backwards on. When I get in a car in New York, almost inevitably there's frustration, pain, and waiting.
Yeah.
So if I can avoid those, I'm just going to avoid them.
Happy camper.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What have been some of your favorite moments of riding this particular bike, other than your daily commute? Is there anything that really sticks out?
For me, it's actually the safety aspects. It's like when I run over something that I didn't ever see, and I kind of hear the bike and I feel a little click or movement from the bike, and I look back and it's like a broken muffler in the street or some like outrageous, awful thing. And I'm like, oh, that didn't kill me. That's awesome. Like, that to me is a moment where I kind of feel like a win. I also really love rolling up to a restaurant with my wife on the back and like throwing our helmets in the bike and just like enjoying our meal, like looking at the bike, like kind of feeling that you found a trick, right? Like everyone else is, they slogged there on the subway or whatever else, but I was chit-chatting and we were hugging. Yeah, I kind of feel like I beat the game. So that's one of my favorite New York moments is that kind of experience.
So you arrive at your restaurant, and although you might have eyes on it, like you said, how do you secure something like this that is of great value, but also is pretty portable for someone to take?
So we kind of have multiple layers of security built in, starting with a pin pad control for powering the system on. So, this is a bike that's designed to be an electric assist from the start. You can absolutely ride it without the assist, but it's kind of a heavy, slow beach cruiser when you do that. So we can pin lock out the power system. That's going to slow anyone down. We have locking points built into the bike where you can attach a U-lock or a standard chain lock if that's what you want to do. Our special sauce on that is that if you're not carrying an extra battery, the battery space actually can double as a U-lock holder. So for carrying, an umbrella, U-lock, small objects, you can still carry that in the bike, which makes it much more convenient than sort of hanging on your handlebar or rattling around on your frame. And we have a future technology plan to add some extra levels of tracking and recovery protection that will be coming out in the next generation.
It's something to consider, especially in a big city like New York City. I'm sure that's a concern for a lot of people.
It is, but we tried very, very hard to design this bike not for where we lived, but for everyone. One of the things that we saw when I was a retailer is we would get a lot of products in that had clearly been designed for their home place. We had a very high-end, really beautifully, exquisitely designed Swiss electric bike. It was fast, it looked great, but it had been clearly designed for perfect Swiss roads. And the moment you were on a New York City road, you're like, oh, this doesn't work here. We had another company that had an early product that they delivered us, and super cool product. Technology was bitching. Every fastener on it rusted within the first 6 months of getting to New York because they weren't in a salty place and they hadn't thought of that. And the big lesson that I took away was, think about where this is going to be used and does it work for them? And while New York City is one of those, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere cities, we actually think our bike is better suited for your smaller cities, your suburban communities. Our bike is fundamentally, we want it to be the fiercest competitor for that second car ever. And for most of them, New York is unique. Most of us don't actually have cars here because cars are counterproductive, painful. It's
expensive because you got to park it somewhere.
And frankly, just not an effective way of getting from point A to point B in a time-effective manner. It just doesn't really work here anymore. We've kind of hit peak car, and it's kind of broken as a transportation system, unless you're going out of the city. But most of the country has a kind of a different layout. They're more suburban, they're a little more spread out. People have a car or two, they have some garage space. And that's really the model that we're targeting, right? Where you can take that second car that you don't use, you pay an insurance bill on, you pay a depreciation bill on, and now for all those sort of short, 5 to 10 mile trips where you just need to grab that one thing or run your 9-year-old to school or to soccer practice, this is a solution for that that's better, faster, you have parking, more efficient. It just kind of checks all the boxes of why you would do it. And if at the end of it you want to be like, oh, I'm being really environmental and green, that's great too.
Bonus ad, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we knew we wouldn't shift behavior until we create an experience and a solution that's compelling enough to get people to do it because it's better, right? It's an upgrade, right? Like there has been this kind of, I feel like, I'm not going to betray my age, I'm roughly 50, but for most of my life, being green had been seen kind of as like a hippie thing, right? Like something that, those weird granola crunchy people. And it's like, if we want change, we have to prove that this is all upgrades. This is all a better way to live, a better way to do things. Coincidentally, it's also better for the planet, but fundamentally, it's better for you. It's better in your life. And that's how people make decisions, and that's how we move the needle. And, whether we've had the ultimate solution for that or not, this is our best stab at it, and we have a vision for more coming. The real goal is to show what's possible and to elevate everybody into getting out of their cars and getting onto two wheels.
I will say that takes a lot of motivation. So what keeps you motivated on pursuing this?
You know, for me and the life I was given and the circumstances that I went through, this is my biggest opportunity to have an impact. The hippie child side of me says, you know, we are in a very serious climate crisis. It will require all of us to put our shoulders against the wheel to have a change. And you know, with what I learned growing up and the set of skills I was given, this was the way that I saw was the most effective for me to kind of try to move the needle. And you know, there's a lot about Elon Musk that's very controversial, so I will say, and I have a lot of problems with many elements of what he's done. But what he did at the beginning, which I have a tremendous respect and admiration for, is he went out early. He said, we're going to not take this hippie approach. We're going to do this from a design, it's an upgrade approach. And we're going to convince the world that this is a good thing that's cooler and better. And we're going to drag everyone else kicking and screaming with us. And so, you know, whether I wind up like Elon Musk with a lot of money or not, isn't actually, at the end of the day, super important to me. What I care about is can we move the ball forward? Can we show what is possible? Can we give people a different vision of how their life can be that's an upgrade and is also compatible with a sustainable future?
Yeah,
and so
it's more mission-based and it's more eye-opening.
Yeah, and so for me, you know, I don't talk a ton about the mission stuff because I don't think it's not the reason for people to participate in the Civilized experience. It's a reason.
Not everyone believes in that though.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't care. But at the end of the day, for me personally, what gets me up in the morning when it's been difficult and there's been, you know, a phone call from our factory partner who says, oh, there's this hiccup or pain point. What gets me up again is like, no, this is where we're gonna make a difference. And, you know, it just sort of feels like my life's work.
One thing that you had touched on there with the manufacturing is, do you ever see you bringing manufacturing here to the United States?
Well, we have a really good manufacturing partner now who builds many of the premium brands that you're already familiar with in the e-bike market. As long as we're a smaller scale business and while we grow, you know, that they're going to be a fantastic manufacturing partner with us and we don't look at making any changes. As we get bigger, we are always looking to improve both efficiency and ways that we can be more sustainable. And I do think there are some great opportunities in the United States to do that. And we're always actively looking at that. But we're happy with the partner that we have.
I'm really lucky. I get to test out a lot of different e-bikes and I was lucky enough to experience yours, but how could people experience it like I did? What kind of opportunities do you have in place? What's the distribution look like for them to experience your bike?
Sure. So I was a dealer for many years and, you know, had the retailer experience. And, you know, one of the things I didn't like as a retailer is I never really felt that my manufacturer listened to me. And to me, it felt like an untapped opportunity. So when we started thinking about distribution, we spent a lot of time thinking hard about would a modern multi-channel distribution look like, and also knowing that because so much of our bike is about the experience, I mean, it looks cool and it looks different, but it's when you ride it that you really understand the kind of light bulb comes on, like, oh, this is kind of a different animal. We knew that having retail dealers was actually really important. So we've been developing a retail dealer network, and we have, I think, about 35 dealers now spread throughout the country where you can schedule test rides, and they will give you a full walkthrough and explanation of everything on the bike, because there's kind of a lot there to process and to learn about. You know, we also sell direct. We sell through dealers. We have a very unique dealer model where if we have a stocking dealer in a certain territory, we actually share those sales so that our dealer is always aligned with us. And when we know, even if we sell something direct, we know that customer going into a dealer, it's already their customer. They've already got a relationship going with them. So they're going to be well taken care of. Any service issues will be well managed. And we've been very selective about, you know, which dealers we partner with for that. We are going to be, throughout this summer, starting to build up some road shows. There's some of the Electric Expo type things, but we're going to be at CABDA next week. But any opportunity we can to put people on bikes, we want to. We are in negotiations with a couple of luxury resorts to have fleets of bikes there where people could also try them. But we really recommend the first place to start is you can contact us on our website and we'll direct you to your nearest dealer where you can experience it. We have amazing coverage in Los Angeles. We can do anywhere in Los Angeles. We have a mobile dealer there who will come and visit you at your house and give you a test ride right there.
Interesting. Is that like a pilot program, or you think that since that market is very already e-bike focused, it's one of the dedicated markets for that?
We know that the e-bike market in Los Angeles is strong. The visit you with a bike model is something we're still experimenting with, but we're pretty excited about it. What we really need is them to stop snowing in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Well, this has been very insightful and informative. Great to get to talk to you and learn a little bit more about the company and this invention here that you created. But it looks like it's clearing up outside, and I think it would be fantastic if we could ride your bikes in New York City.
I'd love to.
So what do you say? Let's do it.
Let's go.